Rock and Sand Apologetics welcomes you to the seventh Bible study, focusing on one of the characters from the Lord of the Rings. Today, we are going to be looking at Legolas, when much is required. So, say friend and enter. He stands not alone, said Legolas, bending his bow and fitting an arrow with his hands that moved quicker than sight. You would die before the stroke fell. Legolas was much when much is required. I've just gone over Gimli, the dwarf, and how his great qualities had nothing to do with his strength and might. The next person of the fellowship that comes to mind is Legolas, the elf. For although Legolas started out somewhat of an enemy of Gimli, they eventually became best of friends. According to the Silmarillion, it was the elves who were created first, before man, and lastly the dwarves. As such, they were most like their creator in intellect, wisdom, and even beauty. Those who have viewed the movies cannot dispute the fact that elves are portrayed as a beautiful race of people. While it is true that they had also fallen into the shadow due to pride, they still possess much of their original glory. So Legolas was raised with the prejudice that he was greater than all other species. However, giving it way to man in some areas, since Iluvatar had taken the kingdoms from them and given them over to men, still to think a dwarf to be equal on any level as that of an elf was beyond his thinking. It is to Legolas' uh, credit that even though he had his belief, that he kept his feelings in check for the most part. For the sake of the quest and for the honor of his people, he bore the presence of Gimli in much the same way a rich white man, might befriend an Afro-American. There was a bit of pride in doing that, which he would do in purity without pride. We see at first Legolas being closer to Aragorn, the rightful heir to the kingship of Gondor, than anyone else. Although his abilities are noble, I wonder if he wasn't posturing himself to show the others that elves were of nobility, just as Aragorn. Yet later we find an odd friendship growing between Legolas and Gimli, two opposing races represented here and joined together as best of friends. The quest required many things from certain people. The greater the ability, the greater the accountability. So why Frodo, Sam, Merry, and Pippin were greatly esteemed, and rightly so, those with greater gifts were held to a higher standard. Legolas, being from the first creation, was held to a much higher standard, which he kept, not boasting in his greatness, but in holding himself accountable in all humility and putting others above himself. It is by doing this that Legolas achieved true greatness. I no longer call you servants, for a servant does not know what his master does, but I have called you friends. For everything that I have heard from my Father, I have made known to you. You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you that you should go and bear fruit, and that your fruit should remain, that my Father may give you whatever you ask in his name. This I command you, that you love one another.